Hey everybody, I'm here. I'm like live right now, but I pre-recorded this for, sorry, I pre-recorded it so that you guys don't have to hear all the background noise, but I'm here and I'll be in chat as much as I can. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. Super nice out today, not too hot. Hey Kasha's Gems, hey Nature Lover, Hair Curlers in Crime. If you guys haven't checked out Hair Curlers in Crime, she's awesome. So is Nature Lover. Peas in a Pod. Messy Jessie. Good morning. Okay.
She didn't stay, things got tough. I told a lie, she got mad. She wasn't there when things got bad. I never ever saw the northern lights. Never really heard butterflies. Never ever saw the stars so bright. And in the farmhouse it would be alright, 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 alright. Woke this morning to a stinging lash. Every man has found the lash. Each betrayal begins with trust. Every man returns to dust. Don't ever saw the northern lights. Never really heard of butterflies. Never ever saw the stars so bright. In the farmhouse to be alright, 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 alright.
Summer Moon Utah Wells was reported missing June 15th, 2021 from the 100 block of Ben Hill Road in the Beech Creek community of Hawkins County, Tennessee, around 6:30 p.m. We still haven't heard a whole lot from law enforcement, but we do know that she is still missing, and we know that it's been over 750 days, and we still have no answers, and there's still no summer. Okay, so her parents are still here on YouTube. As far as I know, her parents are still considered suspects because everybody's considered a suspect, and who else could they possibly mean besides the people that were with Summer that day that are suspects? They're still on YouTube, even though they complain about all the hate, and they don't ever want to say anything about Summer or the case or anything about June 15th because they think people will twist their words. And they've already said what they're going to say. They say they've already told law enforcement everything, and they're the ones that know the truth, and that's all that matters. So I listen to everything that they say when they do come on here, because it's really got to make you wonder, why are they still here? Don was on Janky's Rumor Has It, June 28th, 2023. This live is titled, Let's Have a Little Chit Chat. All right, so Don comes on somewhere around 3 hour and something mark, somewhere in here, about 3 hours and 38 minutes, around there, 37 minutes, Don comes on. Okay, so if you want to go over there and check it out for yourself, fast forward to 3 hours and 37 minutes, and that is when Don comes on, and he stays on pretty much the whole rest of the time. Okay, so he says he's doing all right. He's hanging in there the best he can. Sounds a little bit mopey as usual, which is exactly what I expected him to say, because that's what he usually says, something like that. I want to start off by saying, if you consider Don has guilty knowledge in Summer's disappearance, it fits with everything he says and does. The way he acts, his lack of empathy, not wanting help, finding Summer from wherever he can get it, his seemingly, he seems to just accept that Summer is gone so quickly right after her disappearance, like the day she disappeared, talking about seeing her in the resurrection. Don not wanting the person who did this to Summer in prison for the rest of their lives. Everything makes sense when you consider Don guilty. That, that's not to say he is. I just can't help but point that out. Why is Don or Candace here if they are so sick of all the hate and so afraid to talk about the missing time from June 15th? They don't want to answer so many of the questions that people have pertaining to Summer. And when some of those questions are answered by Don or Candace, it only leads to more questions. And they consider that hate when people question them on things they've already answered, because they literally don't understand why they would give the answer they did, or because they know it conflicts with other things that they've said in the past. And when people call them out on that, or even when people are nice and asked respectfully, they still consider it hate and twisting their words. So I think they just don't want to be pressured on things that they know they're lying about. So, yeah, they call that rude, though. Candace says people on here just use her and abuse her, and they say everyone will twist their words if they explain further about anything, so they don't. Candace says Ellie knows the truth. Well, it seems the quote-unquote truth that Ellie knows, they aren't satisfied with as being the whole truth and nothing but the truth, as portrayed by Don and Candace. So there's this lady on panel, I can't remember what her name is off the top of my head. It's like Sarah Rose Salavi. She says she just got kicked out of PG's chat. Don says he thinks Prayer Garden is totally disgusting, trying to make up a narrative of whatever and whatever evil monsters that she can think of, and that's all she's about. Okay? Don, you sound kind of fake when you talk like that. Like, kind of sound like a child when you talk like that. Don says, I have listened to PG a lot because of Don, or I say, I have listened to PG a lot because of Don being on her channel. But to be completely honest, I don't go over there. I don't know PG, obviously, but I don't like the way she talks in Summer's name. I don't like some of the things she says or the way she interviews people all the time, but I don't hate the woman. I just don't go over there. Don is talking to another man on panel too, Chill Billy, that's on Janky's panel, and Don tells him he's hanging in there with all he's got. And he says, you know how it is, man. And Chill Billy's like, yeah, nodding his head like he understands. Although Don is awfully non-specific about what exactly it is. Because in Don's world, I can imagine that could be a number of things that likely the average person wouldn't probably understand. But this dude just is like, yep, totally get it, dude. Don doesn't want to talk about Summer, in my opinion. He doesn't want to talk about what's really wrong because he can't tell anybody how he really feels. He has to put on a facade all the time if he is guilty, which I believe he is, withholding information, which could lead us to Summer. And I think he knows exactly what happened, and that's just my opinion. Don't you want to talk about your missing daughter, Summer, as much as you can at whatever opportunity you can get? Say her name, say that Summer is missing, and it's weighing on you. If that's the case, in my opinion, that would set him free if he did say how he really felt and was honest about what he really knows. I think it would spiritually set him free in many ways. It would also get him locked up at the same time, so he won't ever do that, in my opinion. Don tells Chillbilly he appreciates his help, and he wants him to know that. He says that's something that neighbors do. Don says, I'll be home soon. He says, I told Candace whenever you guys come back home to holler at me when you come through. Chillbilly asks if Candace's ankle is better, because Candace always has something broken or cracked or fractured or wounded or dying, and there's always a reason why Candace is in pain. There's always something holding them back somehow. They don't talk about being brokenhearted over Summer as much as they talk about how hurt they are by everything else in life. All the hate they get on YouTube, yet here they are, never answering the question, completely avoiding it actually, then deflecting onto his older daughter, Margie. Don says his daughter has to go through 6 weeks of infusions for a bone infection she's suffering that could potentially be fatal and typically is. That's terrible. I hope the best for Margie. I wouldn't wish pain or some fatal infection on anybody. I mean, I'm not like a huge Margie fan. I have no opinion on her really because I don't really know what she got out of the interview she did with Damaged Goods, what her intentions were, if she was persuaded. I don't know. I think maybe she tried to talk her dad up to do him a favor, and maybe she got something out of it. I'm not sure. But I couldn't take it seriously because I felt like she doesn't even really know her dad, and she's not recognizing any of his bad behavior for what it is, just kind of shrugging her shoulders at it like it is what it is, in my opinion, minimalizing his bad behavior, which was violent and dangerous around Summer and his sons, and probably her when she was young too. And I guess I feel a lot differently because obviously Don's not my dad. And I think Don is not a very stand-up guy. Margie does, though. Nevertheless, I hope she heals quickly and properly. Don says she has some amazing doctors actually helping her, and she's been sick for a while, and they finally figured out what's wrong. And she's doing good, and Candace is going to stay there and keep making sure that she stays doing good. So what is Candace going to do? Not to be mean, but honestly, Candace is always needing help and assistance herself because she's always got something wrong. Candace has a missing daughter who was only 5 years old when she went missing and is now 7, still missing. She hasn't even been cleared as a suspect in her daughter's disappearance, nor has her husband, Don. And she is going to take on obligations to care for other people out of state while doing nothing for Summer. So are we supposed to be applauding Candace for ditching Summer again? No offense against Margie. I want her to have someone to help her. But I feel Don wants to make Candace look good by saying she's staying there to take care of Margie when she isn't doing a damn thing for her own daughter that really needs her more than ever right now, and she puts her to the side. A long time ago she did. I wouldn't be surprised if Candace was called back to Tennessee because there's a case going on there. There's an investigation for her own missing daughter. There could be a number of reasons why Candace could be called back to Tennessee. I'm hoping she does, and it's because they're bringing her in to question her about something involving Summer. Wouldn't surprise me if Candace decided she wanted to go back to 110 and be with Don, so she leaves anyways. Don says, I only got one daughter left now, so wow.
So is he saying Summer is no longer with us? I really don't know how else to take that. He only has one daughter left now? Maybe Don meant that he only has one daughter left because he knows if Summer were found today, that she would go to state custody and into the system, and he feels like he has lost her in that way. But to say you only have one daughter left when you have two daughters, that leads me to believe you're saying you have lost one of your daughters, as in they're no longer alive. That's so upsetting to hear Don say things like that. The woman on panel says, tell Candace I'm thinking and praying for her, and my heart breaks for her because I'm a mama and I just lost my son. So it's been hell, and I'll get sad and start thinking of her, and it's really hard for her. Well, prayers for that woman and for her son. She says she cries for herself and for Candace. Don has a very interesting response. He says, well, we appreciate that, but God has a greater plan. We got to stick with that. I don't know. It's as if Don just wants everybody to quit talking about Summer and leave it to God. Don says it's so hard when you got JLRs and you guys get kicked for sticking up for us. Don says he doesn't know how a federal probation officer would let him get away with doing what he's doing. Don says JLR is the biggest creep in the world. They were talking about JLR stalking Don and Candace at their hotel room. Don says the thing about JLR is he won't talk to Don. He'll only talk about him. He says he's a little punk and he won't face him face to face. Don says JLR is all about fake news. You know what? I bet JLR would totally meet up somewhere and talk to Don in person if he was presented with a legitimate opportunity to do so. I bet he would. Didn't Don actually stand JLR up? Because I'm pretty sure JLR was with the protesters at Ben Hill when they made breakfast plans, I believe with Don, and they waited and waited for him, and Don never showed up. Interesting. So Don is the one that won't talk to JLR face to face, in all reality. Don says he doesn't understand how JLR's probation officer lets him get away with this, because his won't let him get away with a damn thing. Don says his PO called him. He told Don he had to come back to Tennessee and do a drug test, which he did. And when he came back to Arkansas to go back to work, his PO said he needed to come back to Tennessee. So he probably failed the drug test that he went back to take, I would assume, or his PO wasn't happy with things he was doing away from Tennessee, out of state in Arkansas. Let's hope it has something to do with Summer and it's news in Summer's favor. Doubt it, but could be. I just hope and pray, even if we don't know it yet, that that's why. I mean, like I said, I doubt it, but it could be. But Don probably violated his terms in reality with his PO. But regardless, Don says that's no problem. I'm going to go back and do exactly what he says. Don says he's going back to Tennessee tomorrow or the next day, and he's meeting with his PO, and he's going to comply with whatever he tells Don to do. So if Don didn't go to work, lost his job, was just hanging out at a hotel all day while he was supposed to be working, as I've heard, and his PO found out there was drug dealers at his door and everything else, which he likely would find out because that's what POs do. They keep tabs on the people that they have on probation. And if his PO also saw him partying on YouTube, then he probably wants Don back where he can more easily supervise him and possibly reprimand him, because Don can't be trusted to be that far away. And with Summer's investigation going on, they probably didn't particularly like the idea of him going very far anyways. Don says, how does JLR get away with this stuff? He says he's going to comply in every way with his PO, with whatever his PO tells him when he goes back. Don says JLR is trying to say that him and Candace are bad parents and this and that, and he says, and Chris McDonough doesn't have a clue. He's the biggest wimp piece of crap I've ever seen in my life. He doesn't have 4 kids. He doesn't have a clue. Well, Don, you don't have 4 kids either. Not anymore. And Don's sounding more and more intoxicated or high on whatever as the call goes on. Don says having 4 kids is like trying to take care of a tornado. I wouldn't call Chris a wimp, though. I really don't think that's the case. I think Don doesn't like being called out and put on the spot by ex-law enforcement especially, and he just wants to take a jab at Chris because Chris called him out and continues to, and Don considers that war. So Don says Summer come up missing. The police come in and tore our house to pieces many times over, and we allowed Chris to come in for concern for our daughter. We thought this sorry POS would help us, but no, he was trying to exploit us. I really don't think Chris is really trying to exploit Don and Candace. If anything, he's making money off of Summer, not them. But he is also trying to actually help and make a difference, and truly cares and wants Summer to be found, in my opinion, and it doesn't seem like I can say the same for Don and Candace. Also, that's funny because we can clearly see in many different pictures the condition of the Wells home prior to Summer coming up missing. Even one that was uploaded to Candace's Facebook page on June 15th, the day Summer was reported missing, like right around the time the police were called. We can see the condition of the home in that picture, and it does not look good. It doesn't look really suitable for children, in my opinion. And I'm not judging them by the condition of their home. Yes, their home looked to be in poor condition. The living conditions did not seem up to par at all for those children, in my opinion. And I think they could have both done a lot better for their kids, especially Don, considering his line of work. He could have fixed it up better around the house for the kids. And Candace, being a stay-at-home mom, could have managed to clean. That's just my opinion. And I think it's pretty funny. Don would blame their house being tore up on law enforcement when clearly it was already like that before. It was probably hell for law to go through. It was probably just as bad, if not worse, before Chris was there, and people made their own judgments, all on their own. It wasn't because of anything Chris said. He was actually pretty respectful, in my opinion. Don said everyone is just trying to exploit them. Wow. There probably are a handful that are trying to exploit Don and Candace specifically, but they're also doing it themselves. They're throwing themselves into the flames and then bitching about getting burnt. Don and Candace are the ones that are making this not about Summer. They're making it about themselves. They are exploiting Summer. There's a whole lot of people who are not here for money. It's a plus sometimes for some people, but they're here for Summer. Not for Don or Candace, but for their missing daughter, Summer, because some of us can't stand now knowing, is Summer okay? Like, we don't know if she's okay, but we know she's likely not. We have no idea where she is, what happened to her, and we want to see her found and get justice. We want to see her rescued, be able to tell her own story one day if that's what she wants to do. We want to see her be loved and cherished by a family that will take care of her. There's a lot of compassion here for Summer, but I think Don and Candace are sticking with the people that exploit them, even though they complain about it. The people that are actually here to keep eyes on what is going on in Summer's case and what is going on in Don and Candace's life that could potentially pertain to Summer in some way. The people that are still here trying to piece something together that makes sense, whether they think Don and Candace are guilty or not. Don and Candace don't want to talk to those people. They don't want to talk to the people that are here solely to keep Summer's name out there and tell us some nice stories about Summer at least and how she was as a person. Don and Candace only want to talk to the people that are exploiting them. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think it actually makes sense when you consider Don and Candace are getting paid and their Cash App is probably blowing up and they're probably receiving other forms of financial gain from YouTube too. And I'm not hating on that specifically, but is that why they're sticking around with who they're sticking around with? Is that a priority to them above getting Summer's information across America? It seems to be, unfortunately. Is it a combination of that and the fact that those channels like The Farm and some others are basically holding their hand through Summer's disappearance as they're flashing Candace's Cash App and speaking on how much they need money? They're being protected from having to answer questions about Summer, not doing anything for her, not answering any questions about her disappearance, about the timeline. Questions LE clearly wants the answers to as well. Not just us here on YouTube. Questions that spur off of answers given to questions that these channels and Don and Candace consider hate just because people want clarification or they see a discrepancy in some of the things that have been said. You know, there are a lot of creators out here that wouldn't even have Don and Candace up on their panel at all if they were given the opportunity, because they don't want them to be disrespectful in Summer's name and on their channel. And they know how they are. They know they're prone to lashing out, especially Don, at any given time, and using racial slurs and other highly offensive language when talking about Summer and while using her name. And people like me do not ever want that on their page. I would never want to contribute to any disrespect towards Summer. And it's pretty freaking sad that her own parents would be cut off of several channels because they can't be trusted to respect their own missing daughter, Summer. They won't come on a live, like on the ball, ready to get some information out about Summer, clearly and as loud and far as possible. No, they come here to defend themselves and to push a narrative, to hear what people are saying, in my opinion. And that says a lot. That's extremely disheartening, and I wish it weren't the case. It truly makes me feel so deeply sad for Summer and what her life must have been like growing up for 5 years with Don and Candace. I cannot imagine, and I'm so relieved to know that their sons have a shot at a better life now without them in it. It might sound heartless of me, but actually it's because I have a really freaking big heart that I say that and feel that way. I can't stand the negligence and total disregard for the innocence of childhood. So Don says, we're about 3 hours and 48 minutes in. Don says, all Chris M cares about is himself and making money. I doubt that's all he cares about. I don't think Chris is a bad guy. I think he does a good thing with his career in law enforcement. I know he's retired, but he works for the Cold Case Foundation. I can't remember his title off the top of my head, but he does do good things in this world. Don makes him sound like a terrible person, and I don't think that's fair. Don doesn't want to own up to his own wrongdoings. He came at Chris wrong before Chris ever came at him sideways. Chris was really respectful towards Candace and Don's property and was trying to do something to help Summer, but Don hates him because Chris is on Don's victims' sides. Don says he even privatized his channel, talking all kinds of crap with all his viewers out there, monetized his channel, and made all kinds of money off of Summer Wells' back. Yes, he refers to his daughter as Summer Wells. I thought that was a little strange, but okay. How much money have they, Don and Candace, made off of their daughter, Summer's back? Whatever happened to Summer, I feel in my heart that they know, and I think it's totally different for suspects to be making money off a case by appearing on YouTube, causing misinformation and drama to spread in Summer's name. Then there's people actually trying to help with credentials that actually have resources that could potentially help Summer. Don and Candace fit the first description, Chris the latter. But Don hates Chris. Okay. So this woman, Sarah Rose Salavie or something like that, I mean no offense, I just can't remember exactly what her name is. She compares that to Prayer Garden and mentions that PG says her channel is Summer's channel. Yet where's all that money go? Not to Summer. First of all, okay, I have a little bit of a rant. Don and Candace probably know their lifestyle choices are selfish, and they probably know they should grow up and do something useful with themselves. Do the right thing for Summer and for their boys. Something to try to at least help themselves, and anything they can do to help Summer. to at least try to be a good person, if nothing else, but they still lie and cheat and steal, in my opinion. They stole the innocence of their children's lives. They stole Summer's entire future, in my opinion, and they're just out there blaming everything on everyone else, and still to this day have not had a wake-up call, with Summer being missing over 2 years, 750 plus days, and their boy's gone basically just as long. Don in and out of jail all the while. They still cannot manage to sober up and reach for something better, to at least show their children they're doing well in life, at least that they're trying and that they are ready for them in the future if they want a connection. But Don and Candace went totally the other way. They just want to stay down low. I think they want to vibrate at a low frequency because that's where they're comfortable. They don't want to achieve great things in life. They don't want to have to make that kind of commitment or obligations. They achieve great things by making all of their children, but they failed all of them in so many ways. Recognize that they fail them and continue to do nothing to attempt to make it right for their children. They may not ever get their children back or even ever be able to talk to them again. They may grow up and not want to talk to Don and Candace, but you don't see Don and Candace doing what they can to ensure that their children at least recognize that they lost such great things in losing their children. Show that they know they messed up, but they're trying to do better now and one day hope to be reunited and have a relationship with their children again. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. I just see acceptance of failure because I guess it's easier that way. And if they do better for themselves, that means they have to let go of their selfish tendencies, like using drugs and getting drunk and high all the time, and get up off their asses and do something productive with themselves. Start doing something productive and helping to find answers for Summer. Accept legitimate help when it's offered. Start gathering people for prayer vigils yourself, being that you're so religious, Don. Start holding think tank meetings on panels instead of just talking smack about other people and being mad about other people talking smack about you. Do it at home. Start answering those hard questions that everybody has. Convince Candace to tell us what was really going on between like 2:30 and 6:30 p.m. on June 15th, 2021. Hang some fresh flyers every week. Take them new places. Encourage others to do so. Join in on the Summer Across America. Even though you hate Trevor Lee, I think he's great, and I actually think you should go subscribe if you haven't. He gives a generous effort for Summer and has since she first went missing, but Don hates Trevor Lee. Trev time. People here on YouTube will make sure that you get flyers if you need them, Don and Candace, if you actually want to go hang some. You could live stream it. I'm sure you'd get some cash apps or something. But yeah, maybe show that you care. Show that you're trying. Prove yourself once and for all. Just prove you're a man, Don, and do the right thing for your innocent daughter that didn't deserve any of this. And tell what you know so she can be found. Or you, for that matter, Candace. Or you, Grandma. Talk to your daughter. Tell her she needs to be honest about June 15th. And if Grandma knows she needs to talk to somebody, it's time. This is never going to go away. The world has fallen in love with Summer. You're an old man, Don. You've spent half your life locked in a cell, and you probably will spend a lot more of it in one, in my opinion. Why not make your life matter and do something great and save your daughter, Summer? You really don't know anything because the people you work with say you were there all day till 6 p.m. So even if you were, you can't tell me you don't know anything or have a damn good idea. I don't believe it. Who came up there then? And was it a lot earlier than 6 p.m.? What else are you hiding? I get a strong, overwhelming gut feeling that Don has some guilt of something regarding Summer. Things that he knows he has done wrong in front of Summer and with Summer around. He probably was violent towards Candace in front of Summer and her brothers, and I wouldn't doubt it at all. Maybe that's why Don is so the way he is, always deflecting and embellishing and pushing the narrative, because he is guilty of things. Maybe he does know a lot more. Just because he was at work, if he really was, doesn't mean he doesn't know more. If someone came up there and took Summer, I think Don knows about it. And if not, I think Don knows about some things that he knows he's guilty of that he doesn't ever want anyone to find out. Give Summer Moon that peace. She's just a little girl. Give her what she needs for once in your life, please. Her brothers need closure if she's no longer with us, and if she is, they deserve to see her again. She deserves answers at the very least, and in my opinion, I think Don has those answers, and Candace too, and probably Grandma, and I think it's so unfair that Summer is yet again shoved to the side because of the wants and needs of her parents. And the people enabling them are actually making me feel sick because they're just as bad. People that are just agreeing with every word they say and taking their word for gold, it really makes me wonder about people and their mental health. And that's not a joke, because they're going against Summer. They're silencing Summer, the victim, the one that deserves it all. She deserves the stars, the moon, the whole world, and is getting absolutely nothing but the shit end of the stick every day that she isn't found, and every day of her life, probably before she went missing too. Can Summer please, for once, have the moment she deserves for her parents to stand up for what is right for her and say what they really know? Of course not, because that would cost them their freedom, as if they haven't had enough of that with their children gone, in my opinion. But it sure does make everything make a lot more sense when I consider Don and Candace guilty, and it makes it really hard to listen to how they are so babied by people on YouTube. No, we don't know that for sure. Nobody knows what Don and Candace knows, but that doesn't mean jump straight to kissing their ass and assume everything they say is true. They clearly know more than they have told, in my opinion. Law enforcement won't even discuss the specifics of the timeline for the integrity of the investigation. Summer's brother or brothers last saw Summer walking away from her home, not going down to her basement, per law enforcement. Also, per LE, Summer was last seen in the early afternoon of June 15th, 2021, which would be prior to about 3 p.m., not around 6 p.m. Lawson said long ago publicly, Candace has hours missing from her timeline, telling her to work on it, even though she was already previously in the initial stages of questioning, told to go home and work on her timeline in the first place and come back with a revised timeline. Still, yet it wasn't good enough. Her and Don sat down to work it out together, but apparently Candace just couldn't figure it out because Lawson did not seem happy with it still. TBI seems frustrated in general and won't characterize anything about cooperation or the timeline, or who is or isn't a suspect specifically. I wonder why. So please someone explain to me how you don't think Don and Candace are guilty of at least knowing more than they have told about the hours leading up to 6:30 p.m. on June 15th of 2021. Because you really believe their story that has changed and evolved over time? How do you ignore the pranks and all the vile things they've said and all the alarming ways Don and Candace have both reacted to so many different things that have been said? How do you see past the acceptance that Summer is gone from them when it hasn't even been close to long enough for that yet, and they've been that way from the start? There's no possible way that they're not hiding pertinent information, in my opinion. Don says PG don't give a damn about Summer. The woman on panel says the boys will be old enough to hear this soon. So what are you going to do when they hear this about PG? I was thinking the same thing, honestly. Although I do not agree with a lot of the things that this woman says. Don says we told our boys and Summer, our kids, every day that we love them with all our heart. Don says they did every single thing they could for their children every single day. I have a really hard time believing this because if that were the case, the house alone would have been in much better condition and more suitable for all of their children, and things would have been up to par for CPS, and clearly they weren't, even after the fact. Allowed to communicate with them. I don't think that's doing everything you could for your kids and loving them with all of your hearts. It's not our fault that Tennessee is corrupt and kidnapped our boys, says Don. It is your fault that CPS in Tennessee made the decision that a judge signed off on to rehome your children because they thought that was what was best for the children and what best suited the law, because there are reasons why they take children aside from a home not being suitable or being able to determine to be able to be determined to be suitable within a certain frame of time. Sometimes it's just because the parents are violent or they're not sober or whatever. Don and Candace probably weren't sober, and they probably considered Don and Candace's domestic violence as well. In fact, I know they did because everything goes into consideration. Don goes on, I know it's hard to listen to. Sorry. He says they'll understand when they're older that the state or the welfare is corrupt. He says, I don't know about the state of Tennessee, but the welfare is corrupt. The woman says it's so bad in every state. Don says, you're right, it's modern day kidnapping. Now, there may be some cases that are very few and far between, but this is ridiculous. She's just buying right into Don's BS, and she's entertaining it all the while. Maybe that's how she really feels, but she's literally adding fuel to the fire. She's making Don's ego bigger and giving him even more BS to say, making him feel like he's right, like people are actually considering what he's saying is true. Don says this is modern day kidnapping with CPS in all states. Don even goes as far to say that he's not even sure welfare didn't take Summer or have something to do with her disappearance. They took his boys, so why not Summer? Don says they're doing it a legal way, yeah, but with high-priced lawyers, ones we can't afford. Okay, but it's not, Don. Because kidnapping it's illegal. There is no legal kidnapping. That would just be like traveling. They're traveling with the children that you had with Candace and rehoming them, not kidnapping them. The children that are no longer legally yours, Don, because of the decisions that you and Candace made, and you continue to make bad decisions and expect your children to not be taken from you when you put them in harm's way. You literally did nothing to try to get your boys back. You didn't even try. You even said yourself you wanted them to take your boys in the beginning because you knew your house wasn't safe. Don, you're acting so shocked and appalled that CPS took your kids, and you proceed to consider it legal kidnapping, which isn't a thing and makes zero sense. Don says if he would have known his rights, he would have told welfare to get the F off his property. He said he probably would have beat their ass, and they would have to come back with a search warrant or whatever. Don said he did not know his rights. He was so stupid. Well, Don, the thing about that is CPS will leave your property, but they won't just close your case because you threaten them and tell them to get the hell off your property. They will still pursue their investigation to ensure the safety of the child or children involved. And if they have to get the police involved, they will, and they do it all the time. If you beat their asses, you will have major charges for that. And you can do that. You can do whatever you want. It's a free country. You make that choice. But you're also choosing to go to jail and owe even more in fines in those circumstances and be red flagged in the CPS system for the rest of your life if you're not already. You can't just tell CPS to leave and have success. That's not your right to choose for them not to be in your life. That's up to a judge at the end of the day. They will come back with police and they will do their job. If they do just close your case, then they've committed fraud, in my opinion, and a disservice to your children by not investigating the claim they were there on in the first place thoroughly. I think Don knows this full and well. He's just trying to sound tough or something. I guess he thinks that's what makes him sound like he is fighting for his kids. Totally ineffective, though. He didn't think that one through. There are CPS workers that suck and don't follow through, but that's not how it's supposed to work, and that's not how it works in most cases, probably. I'm sure for the most part, they actually do their job and are held to a certain standard by people above them. And probably by them, they probably hold themselves to a certain standard too, I would hope, considering their line of work being with children. I don't know what rights Don thought he had that could have kept CPS from taking their boys. I don't think Don or Candace's rights were ever violated. I think Don is just making excuses and blaming other people for his mistakes and wrongdoings. He doesn't have any interest in owning up to his mistakes because he knows he's going to keep making them. And Don, to be pushing a narrative Summer was abducted, that you know for sure Summer was abducted. It's pretty twisted for you to sit here and repeatedly say that your boys were kidnapped. That's very insensitive of you, Don. There's a reason all communications were severed, and I doubt it's because they tried so hard to get their kids back. Don says he was in shock because of Summer's disappearance, because it put him in shock. C'est la vie throws out the word trauma, and Don says, yes, the welfare took advantage of the fact that Don was in trauma. He says, then they brainwashed my boys into all kinds of my boys. It's horrible. And then you got pieces of shit like Chris M. and Doug M. What did they brainwash your boys into, Don? I would love for you to clarify on that, because I doubt your boys were brainwashed. You probably just don't want people to know what they have to say because you know the truth makes you look really bad, in my opinion. Don says he tried to talk to PG and he begged her to talk to him and she wouldn't. I don't blame her. The way Don talks to her, I would not talk to him either. He says he told her after tonight he is praying to God, and after tonight it might be over for her. You know what? I don't know. So is Don saying what I think he's saying? Because that's a death wish on PG from Don. That's what kind of man Don is. Don says PG has no idea of the relationship he had with Summer. Don says they were so close. Don says he has been spending a lot of time right there with his grandkids in Arkansas. I hear the way Don talks in front of and to his grandkids, and I don't like it. It doesn't sit well with me at all. He says his oldest daughter is in very serious danger right now. She has a bone infection from getting hit by a car 15 years ago and had to have immediate surgery. So that's crazy because I've never heard of someone getting a broken bone and then getting an infection years and years later, but from what I see online, it's not very common. Don refers to her condition as rare. Don says he's glad Candace is there to help her because she has to have infusions for a couple months every single day. Don says they had to drill a hole in her bone and put antibiotics in it. He says every day she has to go for 2 hours and every day for the next 6 weeks, so it could be bad. She's got 2 of my grandkids here. Don says my PO is making me leave the state after he told me I could go here and work, he says. He says he had to change his PO to there in Arkansas, but now he's pulling everything back out from under him, saying he needs to go back to Tennessee. It could have something to do with Don being intoxicated so often. It could be a number of things. His probation officer probably gave him certain terms and conditions under which he was allowed to be out of state, and Don probably violated those terms
And whether it was inadvertently or due to Don's lack of caring or trying or whatever, he clearly isn't sober in this video here. And anyone that thinks he is, that's your opinion, but I call it like I see it, and he is messed up in this, in my opinion. I can hear it in his voice. I can't not hear it. He sounds high as a kite, and I don't mean on weed. Don says he thinks people online are calling his PO and saying he's doing all these bad things, but they probably aren't in reality. Maybe a couple people, but I doubt that's why his PO is calling him back. But I guess it's possible. The PO probably already saw everything for himself that anyone called into them. Chillbilly says if you go to any of the locals in the area, immediate area, all the way to Kingsport, Baileyton, Rogersville, and you mention YouTube, they're going to roll their eyes. Does he go around talking about summer to people in all of these towns? Is that how he knows that? I mean, I hope he does. That's great if he does. But I just ask because how would he know that? And I don't care if it's a police officer, how many police officers he has asked about. How many police officers has he asked about summer wells? Because he says it doesn't matter if it's a normal, average, everyday Joe or a police officer, they roll their eyes. Because they know that YouTube is a joke when it comes to this. No offense to this dude at all, but you mean when it comes to Summer Wells' disappearance? There's a lot of people here that don't want people to stop talking about Summer. We don't want to see her name fade away and watch her case grow cold. The law says it's not, but they haven't been able to tell us anything yet. And though I try to remain hopeful, I do worry. I worry sometimes that they still have as much as they had on June 15th, aside from cell phone data, and maybe a couple other things. And the phones they did manage to get a hold of. But maybe they're building a case and it's just a matter of time, and before we know it, like Jackie and Trezell were taken in out of nowhere, and there was no updates for a long time in Classic and Sincere's case prior to Jackie and Trezell being taken in, and they were just swooped up out of nowhere one day after a couple years. So maybe Don and Candace will be taken in soon too, who knows? I keep the faith in TBI. I try to have as much faith as I can in Hawkins County, but sometimes I do wonder. I wonder how much they have checked into certain things, like the church, like Don being at work all day. Who is the one leading the circus online that this dude is referring to, that the people all roll their eyes at around Hawkins County area when they hear about Summer Wells and YouTube? Don and Candace, Jody, protesters, Benny Keys. And most of these locals don't even seem to be very fond of Don or Candace, and they've probably seen them on YouTube. That's probably why they're rolling their eyes, in my opinion. And maybe they've seen the heels on the ground in their area, and they didn't like the way that all went down, especially with Benny Keys there making a racket or doing whatever they were doing at the time. And people probably didn't like their property being like viewed by thousands of people on the internet. I don't blame them. So I'm trying to find where this starts back up again. So Don said, all right. Yeah, at the end of the day, I still feel like Don and Candace have some guilty knowledge of what happened to Summer and where she is. Detective Pruitt, he thinks she's close by, and he has access to all of the information that they know about Summer's disappearance, and he thinks she's close by. He doesn't think she was abducted and doesn't think she was trafficked out of the area. That's totally different than what Don says. Don probably hates Pruitt too. Don says the cop in Baileyton, whenever Doug or whoever in his chat called the police on him when he got his latest DUI,
He says that cop that pulled him over said he was falling all over the place. But Don said he wasn't. That's not true. So Don asked to see the video of it when they were in court, and the cop said there is no video. Straight lied on me, he said. That cop lied in his police report. They're dirty, Don said. He said they straight lied on him. Everyone on panel agrees, surprisingly quickly, and says how the police are corrupt, and C'est La Vie starts talking about Freemasons. Maybe there is something to uncover there in Hawkins County. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me, but why would a cop lie about Don falling over drunk? And what does the Freemasons have anything to do with them lying on Don over a DUI, if that were even true? If he was, Don, I mean. I don't know why Don wouldn't just admit it if he was falling over drunk. It's done and over with now, pretty much, and it kind of makes him look a lot worse saying something like this. Like, for real, dude, we're supposed to believe the police officer that is saying this is lying, and that you're the one that's being honest when you are clearly drunk? All right, so they've got to have body cams. There was a law that was passed in 2018 requiring police officers to wear body-worn body cameras, so I'm pretty sure the Federal Police Camera and Accountability Act, pretty sure they would have to have body cams. Don says he requested the footage but was denied, being told there is no video, if you want to believe that. Different counties have different body-worn camera policies, but like I said, I'm pretty sure they had cameras. Regardless, Don says for a cop to lie and a judge to allow it pretty much blew his mind. If they did lie, well, shame on them, but I don't believe it. And what would they gain from lying? They're going to have plenty of other cases. It's not like they're just picking on Don because they have nothing better to do. At this point, it's about 4 hours in. Don says he don't blame Ronnie Lawson for protecting his son. Ronnie Lawson probably worked his ass off to get in the position that he's in. But to allow Baileyton, a POS cop, to lie on me in court and a judge to allow it and all that, and Don says he gets it now. They lie every day. I blame Ronnie Lawson for protecting his son. I don't think anybody, no matter who their dad is or whose son they are, should be protected when they're doing crimes against children like that. Don says he gets it now about that all cops do is lie. So now, since Don went through a DUI charge, now he gets it that all law enforcement does is lie. It's just made up of a bunch of liars that lie every day. If only Don could have such clarity about Summer. Chillbilly asks if he was in Baileyton or what. Don says it was only a .085, which is only .05 over the legal limit. He says he's blowed a .24 before. Now that was drunk. So if Don was that intoxicated that the police officer thought it was impairing Don's ability to walk normally, then that makes me wonder if Don was on something more than alcohol, since he barely blew over the limit. That would make sense. I know these days a lot of police officers will actually give a full panel drug test right there on the spot, but that's not what they did for Don. They just breathalyzed them. Don says, I blow a .085, and they act like I'm the biggest POS in Hawkins County.
I think Don has probably given Hawkins County a pretty bad impression, but I doubt it's nothing they haven't seen before, and I doubt they single Don out from anybody else in Hawkins County that they deal with, that they've probably had multiple encounters with as well over the years. The woman on panel, that C'est La Vie, she says, yeah, they have to meet their quota or whatever, which I don't really think that's fair to make a judgment over all police, because there are some bad police that are corrupt, but there may be a lot more corruption around Hawkins County that I'm aware of. I don't know. That wouldn't surprise me, given Brandon Lawson's sentence and the lightness of his punishment being basically put back out to reoffend at some point, in my opinion. He should be locked up till all of his victims surpass 18 years of age, at least. I think that's how it should be for anybody that makes those kind of offenses. There's clearly something going on there that doesn't sit right with anybody. So there's clearly some corruption in Hawkins County, in my opinion, but it doesn't mean that they're picking on Don. Just my opinion. I think they could have locked Don up for a few things over the years that they haven't. Maybe not necessarily Hawkins County, but police in general, which Don seems to just hate police in general. Chilbley says Baileyton is in Greene County, and he was surprised they didn't take him there to Greene County Jail. Don says he wishes they would have. He would have been better off. Don really hates Hawkins County specifically, though. Don says Fred is probably in his old cell in AO5, and he was like bragging, kind of like, yeah, I was in AO5. Like, what's up? I was in there too. I do jail. Like, dude, you're not cool. He said for his protection. Don's joking around about when he was in jail and now Fred being there, but it's really not funny because given the circumstances, Don shouldn't be laughing about messing up, especially if he's going to accuse Fred of being the reason Summer is gone because of meth traffic. Chilbley says Fred got a rude awakening when he came in, and Don says he doesn't believe that story that Fred told about how he got almost unalived by somebody that just came in. Don says Fred probably ripped somebody off is what it is. Don says Fred Hill used to roam around, like if Don got up at 2 a.m. or something looking around, Fred would be out on somebody's porch with a flashlight riding around all night long, which was weird to me because why was Don out and about around people's front porch himself? Like, how does Don know Fred would be out riding with a flashlight all night long on all these different people's properties? Like, did he follow Fred around on some kind of suspicion? Why? Was Don out being a peeping Tom? Is that how he knows? Was he out trying to steal some panties? What was going on there, Don? He says one night he went out to talk to Fred. He went to ask him something, and he's caught Fred taking stuff from other people's property. Don says he has a golf cart, and he was using that to go take stuff from other people's property, and he says he's never said anything till this point. Funny. Don wouldn't mention someone doing weird and sketchy things around their property. You'd think he would have mentioned that a long time ago and put Fred at the top of the suspect list way back when because he thought Fred was creeping around in the woods. Wouldn't that make him more suspicious than anybody else that he said? But now it dawns on Don. Just now, for some reason. Don says Fred's been lying since day one. Okay? Well, I think you've been lying since day one, Don. Don would know because he went up there on day one, right? Though Don and Fred's version of their conversation and events were a lot different from each other. Don says he's been up to Fred's house several times trying to get answers, and Fred starts talking about meth monkeys out in the woods and everything else, stirring me off in the wrong direction. All kinds of wild stories he would tell me. That's the example Don gives. And it's actually one true thing that Fred said. Don says Fred's just trying to get notoriety and money on his books. That's all he cares about. I don't believe that, but I don't know Fred. I don't think he would be doing anything for notoriety. He just doesn't seem like that type of person to me, but I guess maybe. I don't know.
They think it's convenient to find out that Cotton died in February, rest in peace. Then Fred blames Summer missing on Cotton. I think Don is throwing shade at Fred, like Fred could have been the one trying to frame Cotton or blame him. Don says he guarantees the detectives are trying to talk to him, but he keeps putting them out in left field somewhere. How would Don know that? The detectives wouldn't tell Don that. Don says he wants to beat Fred's ass so bad because he says things out of left field, and Fred could be the one responsible for Summer's disappearance. All the people that he had in and out of there on meth heads in and out all day long, all night, he could be responsible. And he wants to sit there and talk crazy? The boy needs his ass beat, says Don. Don says he wants to play games after my daughter's disappearance. When the police was up there at my house, I go, aren't you going to knock on Fred Hill's door or any of the meth heads around here? I went and I drove over to Fred's house and I about kicked his door in. Fred told Don he's seen some meth heads over on the ridge and talking all kinds of crazy. You cannot get a straight answer out of him for nothing, Don says. And here he is again playing games on Ziggy's Live, everything else. You cannot get a straight answer out of him, says Don. And then Don says he will get a hold of the behavioral panel and ask them what they think about it. Don says Fred's an everyday user, and every day Fred shoots that crap in his arm. I hope Fred can get off that crap. It's not worth it, and it just makes life worse for the people around you, too. So I hope he does kick that shit. Don said he felt sorry for Fred, and he gave him a black truck. Don told him to haul that stuff off or whatever because he didn't want to clutter up his driveway. He said it's a brand new motor, and Fred hauled it straight to the junkyard for meth. How does Don know that? Did he see Fred get the money for the truck and then go to where he knows he gets that crap from and watch him purchase the stuff, and then that's how he knows? Like, how else would he know that? Or did Fred tell him that? Don agrees that Fred is in the best place he can be right now, in jail. And maybe he's right. Maybe Fred needs to get his head right and go to rehab or something. The woman on panel, Saylavie, I think her name is, says maybe they should give him a lie detector test and maybe they'll get somewhere. She's talking about with Summer's case. And Fred is allegedly going to take a polygraph from what it sounds like from what he told Ziggy. So I wonder if he has yet. They're going to hook him up, and I guess then we'll see if anything will come of that. But I doubt Fred will go around telling people if they hook him up and he fails. Maybe Hawkins County would announce that, but it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. They don't want us to know anything, it seems like. Ronnie Lawson is supposed to have an update soon. We'll see, I guess. Don says there was a lot of traffic coming in and out of the holler because of Fred Hill. He needs to own up. Don says that asshole needs to own up. He's the reason all that traffic was coming in and out of the holler, says Don, and I want to beat his ass so bad and make him realize this, Don says, sounding more intoxicated as the call goes on, in my opinion. Why now that Fred is locked up is Don saying all of this? Don says, I promise you that Summer would never leave our property, but there's the possibility that someone may have lured her because she's a little kid. Don says, I don't think she would ever leave from around our house unless she was lured. Don says there's two things we've got to stick with. Okay, here's the two things. The boys were the last ones to see Summer go down into the basement, and the dogs, they followed Summer's scent all the way down, not the driveway, but the dog trail. Does Don want us to think the dog trail and not the driveway? Because if Summer went down the driveway, she would have been seen by Candace coming back from Grandma's trailer to go back inside, and she would have been more likely to have been spotted in general. I don't understand why Ellie says the driveway, but Don insists that it was the dog trail. Maybe there were dogs that followed a scent down the dog trail too, and maybe Don saw that and is just assuming, but I know he knows the law said driveway because he disputes it. Why? He thinks Ellie lies about everything. Is it because is it because it was Hawkins County that said it, and Don thinks Ronnie Lawson has some vendetta against him? I don't know. I can't make sense of that whole driveway or dog trail thing. I also cannot make sense of the fact that Ronnie Lawson said Summer was last seen by a sibling walking away from her home. Certainly, he wouldn't have mistaken that information with her last being seen going down to the basement, yet Don wants us to believe that Summer was last seen going down to the basement. Why? Is this because Summer was last seen by one of her other brothers going down to the basement, by not another one walking away from her home? Then why not say that? Why not stick with what law enforcement says? Because they're saying what they're saying for a reason. Don just says what he thinks. He wasn't even home, allegedly, so why doesn't he go with what Ronnie Lawson says about the dog trail or Summer last being seen? Because he says those are the two main things. But he says two things that don't match up with what law enforcement has told us. Why, Don? So Don says Summer's scent was followed last down the dog trail and ended at the road, which according to Don means she was thrown into a vehicle, which is yet again more misinformation. He knows that does not definitely mean that Summer was put into a car like he says. Don says Fred Hill was leaving out at that time, hauling off scrap metal around the time Summer was reported missing. Don says he doesn't have a red truck. He has a yellow Nissan when Jenkins asks. Don says that people that he knows, people he worked with all them years at Tucker Drywall, all of them pretty much disowned him after all of this happened. And they're his alibi, remember? Don tells them, don't be sorry. That's their weakness. Don says, that's all right. I got good people by my side right now. I got a good job when I get back. I don't need Tucker Drywall. Well, Don, I'm sure they don't need you either. But Don says he wishes they would hire him back. I stuck by their side through the whole thing, he says, and all the drama that's been going on for them. Don says he worked for Tucker Drywall for 13 years straight and 7 days a week. I wonder how much money Don made in that time and what he has to show for it now. Just curious. I wonder how much of it he spent on trying to make his home better for his children. Don says Mary's husband used to work at the school at Churchill. He had a trailer house on the property of that school. Don says he gave his mom that playground equipment that was from the school, and he put it in there on the property for the kids. Don says it's right by the road pretty much, by Ben Hill, because they were talking about that stuff being by the dog trail. Don is asked if he knows Chad Arnold. Don says Chad Arnold is still alive because Parental thought he was dead. He says he was at Fred Hill's house when Candace was looking for Summer because Candace drove all the way back in the holler looking for Summer. And Chad Arnold was there at Fred's that day. Now, didn't he say he saw her around like 4 or 4:30? That's interesting, right? I'm pretty sure I've got to go back and find that, which may take a little while because I don't know exactly where to find it, but I'm pretty sure that Fred said that his friend, which would have been Chad Arnold, right, that saw Candace on June 15th, 2021, didn't he say saw her around 4 or 4:30? Which is interesting because the scream allegedly happened around, 4:40, around that time-ish. So didn't say Candace say because she was busy looking for Summer, that's why she didn't hear the scream. Anyways, Fred says he saw Andy go back to the old property, back through the holler, back to their other property that he hadn't been at in a whole year. And he says he saw Don on June 15th around 3 p.m. too, right? Also around 10-ish p.m. when Don came up after Summer came up missing. Don says he went up there enraged and looking for Summer, about ready to kick Fred's door in. Fred makes it sound very different. Fred says Don was up there talking about religion and being weird, and he thought Don did something to Summer by the way he was acting, talking about God and religion, like he needed to do away with his major sins. Don says Chad loves his methamphetamines, so meth is obviously the drug of choice around there, from what it sounds like. For anyone that hangs out around the Wells, works with them, lives near them, comes down their road, everyone is on the crap. But Don had to YouTube it to know what people on that crap acted like. Why didn't he just look around? He somehow knows what they're all there for, but how? If he had to look it up, how did he always know that's what everybody was on and that's what everybody was there for? He says Chad's not an RSO that he knows of. Don says he went to Chad's wife's house and visited with Chad a few times for various reasons, trying to get truck parts or whatever. And yeah, he's definitely showed me some big pieces of, big pieces of what, meth? Don says he's definitely into that stuff. So I'm assuming he was talking about big pieces of drugs. Why would he be showing Don unless he knew Don was a user and or a buyer? Jenkins asks if Fred has schizophrenia or something, and Don says Fred has meth-induced psychosis. Did Don learn that from his YouTube search too? Jenkins chat asks Don if he thinks Fred, Cotton, and Chad took Summer, and Don says he doesn't know. He has no clue. He doesn't even think about that for a second. Just like, oh, I don't know, I have no clue. But then he just quickly starts talking about, it's just like Dudley, like that weekend. I guess he went and done dope all weekend and showed up Monday, and I guess I fired him Monday or Tuesday, I don't remember, which Don would have been Monday because it was allegedly the day before Summer was reported missing, and Summer was reported missing on a Tuesday. Don says he can't deal with that stuff, meaning Dudley being inebriated at work, I'm assuming. He says Dudley lied about Don ripping him off for money. From what I made of all that, they were both kind of lying about what happened there. Maybe Dudley felt ripped off because he showed up, but Don was mad because Dudley didn't share his drugs. Who knows? I'm kidding, but I don't believe Don was telling the whole truth about that either. I don't think Dudley was either, though, so. Don agrees that Dudley lies in his interviews. I think Dudley said a lot of things he just heard off YouTube as if it was facts that he knew when it was really just stuff he heard on the internet. Dudley sort of acted like he had some kind of inside information, but really he wasn't even being honest. I wouldn't expect him to admit his drug use and being high on the job on camera for thousands of people to hear, but he did go above and beyond to make himself sound like a gold star A1 worker that was so wildly surpassed Don on the job. And like Don was just always high and strung out on the job doing crazy things when it seems like they both were. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Don says he's not claiming he's an angel because he's not. Don says he just wants to make that clear. He's no angel. Yeah, I think we figured that out a long time ago, Don. Nobody's perfect. But Don, we see that you are certainly no angel. Don't worry about getting that point across. I think everybody already gets it. Jenkins asks what Don thinks about Andy. Don says he doesn't think Andy had anything to do with anything, but he thinks Jody is the biggest nutcase he's ever seen in his life. He says they did everything they could to help Jody. Now, Jody says close to the same thing about what she has done to help the Wells. He said even the PIs went up and moved all her crap for her, drove up that steep-ass hill in his four-wheel drive and moved all her stuff. Don says Jody tried to give them her cigarette machine and some other stuff, and they wouldn't take it because they thought it was probably Andy's because Jody was trying to be mean to Andy or whatever. What does Don mean by that? Jody was trying to be mean to Andy or whatever. Why? He probably deserved it. in my opinion. Andy's probably a piece of shit, in my opinion, anyways. So why is Don even defending him? I mean, if he wasn't, he wouldn't have been beaten on Jody, no matter what you think of Jody. That's just my thoughts. I don't particularly care for Andy. I've never met the dude. That's obviously based on what I know of him from YouTube, but that's how I feel. Don says his PIs moved all of that stuff out of the kindness of their hearts, and so did Candace. He said they barely know Jody, and why she turned on them and said all this crazy stuff is beyond him. Unless it's just to start a YouTube channel or whatever. I wish Don would just give some specific examples of what he means by all this crazy stuff, like what? What did she say exactly that you didn't like or that wasn't true? Don't you want to clear that up? I know they've had words and they don't like each other, but you can't tell who to believe or how far to believe them. I think it's possible that maybe Jody might have exaggerated a bit when telling some details, but maybe not. Maybe everything she said was true. I want to hear Don or Candace straight up deny giving Summer liquor in a sippy cup, for example. I'm pretty sure Don denied Summer ever running around naked outside. There's been a lot said. I'm thinking it was Don. It may have been Candace. But I was thinking it was Don, and it was around the time him and Jody had it out on a live not too long ago. He said Summer didn't run around naked that he knows of, and I can't remember exactly what he said. I would love to hear Don and Candace actually address some of the things Jody said and give their say on the matter, considering it's directly in regards to their daughter, who is still missing, and they claim to have no idea what happened to her, but they think she was abducted, and they're going to prance all around YouTube, inebriated, giving their 2 cents about Prayer Garden and Ziggy and Fred Hill, what everyone is saying about them. But what about what the people from Beech Creek, where Summer went missing from, and their very own neighbors, what they're saying about their own daughter and them? Where are they to defend all that? Do you want someone talking about your child that way, let alone your child that's missing? Insinuating things about Summer that are borderline neglect and abuse, straight up neglect and abuse in some cases, and making felonious accusations against them involving their own daughter, Summer. I just figured it would have been addressed right away when it was very first said. I thought that would be a big deal, more of a big deal than learning Jenna wasn't really your friend, because Candace was so tore up about that, even though she really did try to be her friend, and Candace was the one that ruined it. But yeah, then she cried and cried about that because she said she thought Jenna was really her friend, and she stabbed her in her back and used her and abused her just like everybody else. And Candace doesn't even get that upset over hearing things like the things Jody has said about Don and Candace involving Summer and their other children. And they don't get fired up about that. That's their own people talking down on them about their missing daughter, Summer, and all of their kids. And they won't specify on things she has said or flat out deny it. They just say they don't know what her problem is. She turned on them and they don't know why. Just like with Allie and her family. They say the same thing about them. My question is, Don claims they barely knew each other, that they didn't really know each other at all. So then how did she turn on you if you didn't even know each other? If you weren't close in the first place? Jose says that Candace and Jody were very close. So Don agrees that it could be to get back at Andy. Why Jody was being mean to him or whatever, I guess. Which makes no sense to me at all why she would say things about Don and Candace to get back at Andy. I don't know. Don says all of these cockroaches just come out of the woodwork. It's crazy. The cockroaches come out when there's a bunch of drama stirred up by suspects and people close to the case that talk to Don and Candace, or people from the holler start throwing things out there that cause crazy speculation, and that just feeds the roaches and keeps them coming around for more. Don is feeding them, inviting them in, and yet acting as if he didn't expect to see them all around. Birds of a feather, Don. They talk about Don Sherfy. Don says he doesn't know if he was friends with Brandon Lawson or not. Don says all he knows is Don Sr. got with his stepdad's sister and had something going on with her. Okay, so Don Sr. got with Don's stepdad's, so his step-aunt. His stepdad's sister is step-aunt. So Don says that I'm not aware of whatsoever. So he's pretending like he wasn't aware of it whatsoever, but yet he knows about it. So that makes no sense. And why Mary, his stepdad's sister, turned on them, and he has no clue why. Okay, so his aunt got with Sherfy Sr., then something happened to her to cause her to quote-unquote turn on Don. Okay. He said his mother, when she was alive, told Mary she was going to get the property, which would have meant Sherfy Sr. would have had some part in that, legally or not, because he was with Mary. I thought maybe that was what he was getting at, something with that, trying to throw some kind of shade at his other neighbors too, but I really don't know. Because then Don said his mother told him that Mary and her husband Cecil and all them worked for his mother hourly, and she led them along, and they thought they was going to get the property. And my mom said they were basically like con artists, so his mom turned the property over to him, to Don, and that really pissed them off. I need more context to this that Don is saying here, because it's hard to follow him when he leaves so much detail out. I just don't see what Don was getting at there. Someone asked him about Sherfy Jr., and that was his response. He says he doesn't know the full story. He says that's between my mother and them, and my mother's deceased now. Don says his mother had a court battle with the Hills, which would have been Andy's kin. They had a court battle over a piece of property across the street over there and right across from their house. And then the people bought that property in the back and just took over that property that they had the dispute over, and they couldn't do nothing about it. I wonder what year that all went down. Why Don's bringing that up now. Chillbilly brings up Baileyton, which is really close to Summer's house. He says, a minute ago, Don mentioned Baileyton. He says the Bernard family. Do you know if he's kin to any of the Bernards in the Baileyton area? Don says he has no clue. Andy seemed to be pretty up and up, says Don. I don't know if he meant like he seemed like he was happy-go-lucky or doing well for himself or what. Don says they bought weed from him from time to time. Andy would come up with some good weed, so they would buy some. Don makes it sound like they never sought the weed out. Andy brought it to them, and they decided, oh, shoot, we got to buy some because it's really good. And he's already here with it, so they couldn't turn it down type of thing. But Jody says Don would come bugging Andy and begging him for some of his personal, wanting fronts and everything else. He says Andy has always been pretty straight up with them and never caused them any problems, so he can't say anything about Andy because he's never done them wrong. Right, because you probably owe him for some fronts, huh? If you never even really knew each other, I guess Andy never really had a chance to do them wrong unless he went out of his way to do them wrong. I think they were all a lot closer than Don says, though. Maybe not close, but I think they had a lot more interaction than they say they have. And they probably have seen a lot more inside each other's lives than they lead on. Things they don't want, like, each other to talk about. That's just my opinion. There's probably been a lot of untrue things said and a lot of truth said as well, but we will likely never know for sure what, if any, of what anyone has said about anything that's gone on anywhere in that holler is true. Don says Jody was the problem. Don says, but Andy's never done us wrong. He really wants to make sure he gets that through our heads. Don says he just hopes and prays for Andy's kids that they turn out okay. Why would he say that? What are Don's concerns about Andy's kids? I truly wonder, because Jody's daughter actually sounds really well spoken, articulate, smart, and well taken care of, in my opinion. I don't really know about Damien. He appears to be trying to do well for himself, but that's about all I can say. I don't know anything about them, and I don't really want to talk about them. I just wonder why Don would say that. After saying Andy has never done them wrong, talking him up, then he's like, but I hope his kids turn out okay. Maybe he means because of Jody, but I think the main issue there was Andy, honestly. I mean, I could have it wrong, but Don goes on, unfortunately. But Jody Sue Brown has lied on us continuously. Don says nobody has been ruled out as a suspect. When Jenkins asks if Jody was ruled out, Don says that's a straight lie right there. Don says Jody claims she was at the bottom of the hill right after Summer went missing. So why would she be ruled out? That's actually a good point that Don makes. I don't think anyone should be ruled out that was right there. But I did hear Pruitt say Jody wasn't a suspect. Doesn't mean it's 100, but it made me feel different about her. I think if Ellie is confident enough to say a YouTuber, like to tell a YouTuber that Jody is not a suspect on a phone call, that means they're going off of something that's based off of something that they know. And they really don't think she's a suspect. Don says Andy has an alibi because he was 45 minutes away. Well, if Andy was on camera 45 minutes away for the entire morning and afternoon, that does pretty much clear him of having taken Summer off that hill. Jenkins says Jody was waiting at the end of her driveway for Andy to get home, which we all know Jody has said that. It was shortly after 6 p.m. Don says, well, TBI told me that Andy was at work. He has a rock-solid alibi. Jenkins says, right, but Jody says she was waiting on Andy. Then she said she was planting her wildflowers. I think Jody was saying she was messing with her flowers while she was waiting for Andy, but I don't remember exactly how she said it. Don says definitely Jody Sue has no alibis, but her husband Andy definitely does. But yeah, they were never married, actually. Don says, but Jody Sue is the biggest liar he has ever seen in his life. That honestly makes me feel like Jody has said some things that have struck a nerve with Don because he knows it's true, and maybe she's adding in details that aren't true, and it's pissing Don off because it's not like he can say, like, oh, yeah, that's true, but that's not actually how it went, because then he would be admitting to whatever bad stuff that he did. You know what I'm saying? Jenkins chat asks, what kind of party did they have before Summer went missing and who all was there? Don said, what kind of party? That's kind of a rude question. We didn't really have parties. That's really rude and disrespectful, whoever asked that. I don't see how that was rude or disrespectful at all. I've wondered the same thing. I remember hearing something about a party going on there around the time Summer went missing, like the day before or close to the day of, and the only party we would have is I would go buy fireworks with the kids, Don says, and him and Candace might drink a beer or whatever, but you know what, if it's illegal, Don says they might have a bonfire and sit there and have a good time. 1 second.
Where's her Joey at?
Sorry. So Don was like, yeah, they might get fireworks or whatever with the kids. And Don says, we didn't really have friends over there. There might be a few people that show up begging for money so they could go get their pills or whatever they wanted. Don said he recognized that and he understood that, but Candace's mother or whatever didn't quite understand that. What in the world is he talking about? Don says he would usually loan them $10 or $20 and they would go their way, and he wouldn't mention them by name. But he says it wasn't a party. Chilbilly says more of a gathering, not really a party. Don's like, yeah, we had gatherings with our kids, and I bought fireworks all the time. Don says me and Candace ain't perfect. We might have a drink or 2 or 3. Don says he doesn't know about Marlena's birthday party. He says Marlena was up there with her daughter, but Marlena, I don't know what to say. I don't have anything bad. Don says I don't want to say anything bad about her. I personally don't have anything bad to say about her. I don't know anything about Marlena. Don says he's already said all he has to say about Marlena. Don says these people go out and steal and sell whatever they steal for drug money to get high. That's what they do. We try to keep them away from our house, but like Marlena, we tried to help her out till we realized she just wanted money for drugs. She would dump her daughter off at her house, and it's a sad situation. Don says about 2 weeks before Summer came up missing, he told Candace, you need to take Marlena's daughter to her grandparents' house because we ain't doing this. Because Marlena would just dump her off at their house and leave her there while she went out and got high, and they weren't doing that. Don says Candace took Marlena's daughter to her grandparents and left her somewhere safe because Marlena just didn't give a damn, to be honest. Now, like I said, I know nothing about Marlena. Maybe she said some things that Don didn't like, so he kicked her out and said, we're not watching your daughter no more. Who knows? I don't know. Don says she was the type of person, if you were friends with her or she came to your house and you wasn't home, she would steal everything off your porch and go sell it for drugs. She was doing it to her sister and to everyone else. Don says she will take anything she can so she can go get high. Jinky says Marlena's daughter could have got gone too. Don says she could have been the target. They don't know. I don't believe that. I mean, anything's possible though. Don says her actual family has been fighting for her, for Marlena's daughter, for a long time. Then Jinky starts talking about how she doesn't like Prayer Garden, and Don says she's one twisted individual, saying she just makes stuff up out of the blue. Don says it blows his mind that all of PG's subs believe everything she says. He says people would rather believe a lie than the truth, which I don't know about that. He says you go on YouTube and you start talking truth and you might have 100 or 200 people and that's it. Don talks about some of the nasty things he has said to Prayer Garden. Don says he has to get up early for work. God bless everyone. Says he appreciates them all. Says he is praying a blessing for all of them. And says he'll be back to Tennessee in a couple days. He continues to say he's praying for everybody. Says he prays God will show Prayer Garden a thing or two. He thinks God will come through on that. He has faith in it. He says, God bless you guys. Thanks for being my friend. Prayers and appreciate you all. Talk to you later. Okay, bye-bye. Not one word about Summer. No prayer for Summer. Nothing about Summer at all. Just his hate for PG and his disingenuous claims of the prayers he has for everyone else. Praying for Summer Moon and her brothers would be nice. I just want Summer to be rescued. I want her to get her justice, finally. I can't stop thinking about her and how I think her parents know more than they're letting on. And I think about the footprints. If they were so fresh that they had to have been from after Summer went missing, I feel someone must have sat her down because it was up a ridge. So someone probably was having trouble getting through the terrain and sat her down, then kept going. Who was it? Don and Candace probably knows who it was, who they were with, what they were doing with Summer. I just have a gut feeling that they're hiding something really bad. There's a reason why all the embellishing and why the script and the acceptance that Summer's gone and the lack of stories about Summer herself, the lack of trying to find Summer, the way they choose to handle Summer being missing. It all speaks volumes. Summer needs to be found. It's been way too long already. Praying the law has a lot to work with to at least pursue justice regardless of whether she is found, but I just so badly want her to be found and get what she deserves for once in her life, because I don't think she ever did. I might be wrong, I know that, but I feel this way strongly and I know there's a reason for that and I can't just ignore it. I wish I could make the 7-hour trip to Ben Hill and see for myself, get a feel for the land down there that Summer lived 5 years on and played on and laughed and cried on and went missing from. I know I never met you, Summer, but I feel like I know you and I love you and I want you so badly for you to be found. If we never get to know what happened to you, so be it. I want your story to be told, your truth to be told, and people to be held accountable for you being missing and for everything that you have missed. But most of all, I just want you to be at peace. If you were done wrong or ever violated in any way in your life, I hope the person or people that caused that to happen to you are made to face the consequences for that, because that's not acceptable to your entire army of people that you have behind you and shouldn't be to anyone at all. And I pray that you get all of the justice that you deserve. You're so loved. All right. So again, that was on Janky's Rumor Has It. It was a little chit chat. I think that's what it was titled. I have the URL here. I just have to pop it into the search bar. Thanks for being here for summer and for hanging out with me. I always love hanging out and talking and chatting with you guys. It's just hard to be on here much. Sometimes it goes in phases. You'll notice that it'll come in phases and in waves. If I could be here every day, I would. Well, I'm always here. I just can't always record. So it says, let's have a little chit chat on Janky's Rumor Has It. And it was streamed on June 28th of 2023, I believe. Yep, June 28th of 2023. So if you go over to Janky's Rumor Has It, I think it's like 3 hours and 30 some minutes, 33 minutes. That's when John comes on if you want to listen to it for yourself. He does sound pretty intoxicated, not gonna lie.
Exactly.
Well, tell Candace, I've been praying for her and show.
But she's got some good doctors on her side. She's been in surgery, and so she's got to go through 6 weeks of infusions and I'm glad my wife's here to help her, but she has to have infusions for the next 6 weeks every single day.
Maybe that wasn't the best place to pick to choose for to show you an example of the fact that I thought he sounded pretty intoxicated, because a lot of it he's sounds a little bit more intoxicated when he's like fired up and as it goes on longer. But anyways, you'll figure it out for yourself. All right. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you guys, and I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it off now. And thanks for being here. Really do appreciate you guys. Love you, Summer.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Nature Lover, for gifting the memberships. I hope I didn't miss anybody else. I love you and appreciate you guys. And I hope everybody has an awesome day. Love you, Summer. Can't stop, won't stop. No summer, no peace.